Hello, everyone. Today is September 11th, 2025. This is episode 226, and it was supposed to be story number 42. However, without question, this episode has definitely changed. This is now going to be the episode that needs to be done. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, this was supposed to be story number 42. And I had it all prepared and I was ready to go. However, the fact that it's actually September 11th and I didn't even mention it the week before on episode 225, which would have been on September 13th. I should have mentioned it then. My apologies. But without doubt, I'm going to make up for it today. No question. Just so happens that I was going to do story number 42 because I had a little bit of time and I wanted to make sure to get it in. And it just so happens that events of the fact that today is September 11th and the fact that there was other incidents, which I'm going to discuss in the main event, that occurred yesterday as I'm recording this, which would have been September 10th. So I felt the need to do a different show, go in a totally different direction. I was going to go into, like I said, story number 42. There was a couple of those that were a little bit silly, and considering the stuff that was going on, maybe silly is not necessarily what I need to do today. So I'm going to go a little bit more serious. A little bit of politics stuff and a little bit of hero stuff, and again, we're going to talk about a little bit of 9/11 stuff. Par for the course. I have a story that I like to talk about on 9/11, which is definitely one that hit home. Most people don't have a story, but there are a lot in this Northeast area, particularly in New Jersey, New York, that area, and then, of course, Pennsylvania. And there's a lot of people who were literally touched by something that happened on 9/11. I happened to be in a situation where I had something happen that was certainly concerning. And of course, I'm going to tell that story again today, which would be, it's amazing, 24 years ago. About the time that I'm recording right now, because it's, of course, I didn't put my watch on. When you need a time. Yeah, it's 8:06 as I'm recording right now on 2011, on September 11th, 2025, which means the events were already in motion and about to take place, where those terrorists did those horrible things to our country. What are you gonna do, man? It's horrible to think about, but the truth of the matter is, it did happen, and we've got to be, as I say, vigilant, which we have, for the most part, have been doing our best to do in this country. And even more importantly, we have to do that very simple historical truth. You have to study history, or you're doomed to repeat it. It's just that simple. But now, I'm going to go on to, big deep breath, fill in the blanks. Because, like I said, this episode's going to be a little bit more serious than I intended it to be. And the very first thing I'm going to start with is the fill in the blank. And that question is it okay to disagree with people? The answer is yes, it's okay to disagree with people. There's 100 times out of 100 that somebody is going to come up to you and give you an opinion that you don't agree with. But that's okay, because it doesn't matter in the long scheme, in the grand scheme of things. You don't agree with what they're doing. They don't agree with what you're doing. At that point, all you can do is agree to disagree. Now, that's just what happens. There's going to be plenty of like minded people that you're going to run into that are going to be completely 100% in lockstep with what you think. That's okay. Enjoy their company. Get stuff done. But as to the people who don't agree with you, well, that's just the way it is. So, once again, the question is it okay to disagree with people? The answer, that is the blank that needs to be filled in, is yes, it is okay to disagree with people. Now, I'm going to ring the bell and begin the main event. Whew, let's see where this is going to go, because, like I said, it's very much off the cuff here, because I wasn't planning on doing this as an episode, but it is what it is. And like I said, today is being 9/11. I think I'll start there with my 9/11 story. It goes back to, of all things, 1999. Not even 2001 when the events happened. This started in 1999. And it turns out that there was a guy who I worked with at Wawa when I first started there, way back in 1999. His name's Kevin Patterson. Great guy. A couple years older than me. Had been working at Wawa for a while before I got there. And he's a really good guy. Really cool. Fun to work with. Fun to talk to. We had a lot of interests together. He was a wrestling fan. He liked Star Wars. It was fun to talk to him when we were at work, especially during those times when there wasn't really anything going on, because it was a convenience store. There's not going to be a time where there's steady flows of traffic. There's points in time in the small stores when I worked there where you might have 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe even an hour, where nobody goes through there. And at that point in time, you start talking about stuff. And when I was talking to Kevin, I ended up really appreciating it, really liking him. I thought he was a really good dude. And it turned out that Kevin was in a position where he was ready to move on. He wanted to go to bigger and better. And so he went to Chubb Institute for Computers. He went there during that summer of 99, and essentially he learned how to do everything you could possibly do with a computer. That was the path that he wanted to go on. But he still wanted to work at Wawa during the weekends to make some money when he was doing it, because the school was Monday through Friday. At a certain point, he finally got himself a job, and he ended up moving to Paterson, New Jersey, because was it Patterson? No, I don't think it was Patterson. His last name was Patterson. But he moved up north in New Jersey. And in doing so, he was able to be closer to the job that he had gotten. And he got that job, I believe it was in the year 99? It was the end of 99, which is about 2000. And he still would be traveling back and forth because his mother still lived in the area of Lakehurst where the store was. So I would see him from time to time. And we would still chat and talk for a little bit as he was on his way, doing his things. And of course, he had this nice job. Where was this job? Well, he worked in the Twin Towers. Yeah, he worked in the Twin Towers. Now, that was great. He would live in New Jersey still, and he would travel through on the train back and forth to New York to get to the Twin Towers, and everything was great. Of course, you can kind of see where this story is going because, like I said, this is the year 2000. He got the job. He's working in Twin Towers. He's doing really good for himself. And of course, the Twin Towers fell on 9/11. But hold on. There's more to the story. So you gotta wait for this. You gotta wait for it. What ended up happening was, on his way to work one day, he met a nice girl, started talking to her, started dating her, and during that point in time, he was seeing her for, I guess, middle 2000 until, and he was still seeing her, 2001. Now, it just so happens that the day of the Twin Towers being hit by the planes, nobody could get a hold of Kevin. Nobody. But of course, we learned later that, of course, that the cell towers on top of the Twin Towers were gone, and there was a lot of cell service that was lacking, and a lot of communication was just off, absolutely off. Nobody knew what was going on. Even his mother at the time wasn't really sure exactly what was going on with Kevin that day. So there was a very, 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 very solemn feeling at my store because we all knew that he worked there and we hadn't heard from him. And his mother even came in, and she didn't really, she was the conduit that helped us figure out what happened. Now, she didn't come into the store until probably, it was a few days later. It was not until probably past my cousin's birthday on the 13th of September, probably like the 14th or 15th of September. His mother then comes into the store, and one of my other coworkers spoke to her, and she was like, boy, we've been wondering what's going on with Kevin. I mean, we haven't heard anything about him. We haven't been able to get a hold of you. We just finally saw you for the first time in a while. And she looked at my coworker and said, Kevin's okay. And that was a big time sigh of relief. Kevin was good. He was okay. And then we found out why he was okay. And that made everything so much better. The reason why Kevin was okay was because, remember that girl he met in the subway that I told you about? He took her on a cruise that week. So he wasn't even in New York. He was on a cruise. He was nowhere near the Twin Towers when they fell. That was just absolutely the most relieving thing that any of us heard. Unfortunately, there was plenty of customers that actually worked in my Wawa that actually were affected as well, but in a little bit more negative situation. But my goodness, the fact that he would have literally been at work at that time, but he was on a cruise. Huge sigh of relief. Everybody was feeling good about that, and as they say, that some small bit of joy that came out of it was the fact that he made it. He was okay. Granted, like I said, we lost a lot of people that day in the country, but at least we knew of one who was okay. And to make matters better, he actually made a little bit of a joke, and that was a little bit of a comfort to all of us because we were still a little bit sort of like crazy. He's like, well, I guess I'm going to have to look for another job. And considering the things that happened, that little bit of levity for that couple of seconds was enough to make everybody just give a sigh of relief on what was a really solemn day and what turned out to be a difficult several years. But as of now, I still keep up with Kevin on Facebook, and he's doing good. Living life, loving life, and enjoying things. Can't ask for better. Next thing, I can certainly say that without doubt, I had a situation where I'm actually surprised that I was able to react the way I reacted. It's kind of interesting. Now, I've told the story a bunch of times about the guy outside my house who overdosed, and I was able to take care of that. But prior to that, I actually had two other events that were like catastrophic, actually. They were pretty bad. And it wasn't just me, but it was my coworkers, other COs as well. And it's amazing because we would always say, man, I don't know how those firemen do it when they would just run into a burning building, when everybody's basic instinct is to run out of the burning building, run away from the fire as fast as possible. And I personally was like, man, I don't get it. I just don't get it. How or why would you do something like that? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. You don't even realize it until the situation occurs. One day, before we were about to go into the jail and actually start work, me and my other fellow COs were just outside in the waiting room before we were about to go into the secure area, and we were all just talking, milling around, and that's pretty much what we do. We just sort of relax before, I guess you could say it's a calm before the storm. Suddenly, we hear sirens, and hearing the sirens, we all just sort of perk up, and then we hear the sounds of a car crash. Car flips over. Without any slight hesitation, me and about 15 of my coworkers run outside, run across the street to our parking lot, where we see a car leaning over on its side, and a few of our other officers who were on their way in to the jail had just narrowly avoided getting crushed by this car that flipped over, because it turned out that some lady was being pursued by the state police, and she rolled into our parking lot and flipped her car over about 4 or 5 times, narrowly avoiding a couple of my coworkers. But the thing that was most amazing to me is, like I said, that instinct. It was just automatic. Don't know what got into us all, but it was like we immediately recognized that there was a problem, and we had some ability to assist in that situation, and without any hesitation, like I said, me and about 15 of my coworkers ran out, not knowing exactly what we were going to run into, but we were ready for it. And right there, it's like, I never thought about it until just sitting here now, but it's just kind of in you when you have one of these kind of jobs, corrections officer, police officer, firefighter. When you see something, you do something. If a situation requires it, you don't even hesitate. It's just what you're trained to do, and that's what we did. And I found that to be most interesting, that it wasn't even a second of reaction time. The second we heard the car flip, we immediately ran. And that was just, I still can't get over the fact that we were all that instinctive. Me included. I can't believe I did it. Now, another situation happened, and it was equally as bad, if not worse. Turns out that me and a couple of coworkers were off work this time instead of being on work. We were on our way home. And as we were on our way home, and I know that all of us were kind of tired because it was a little bit on the late side, because when you're working a block, you have to wait for your relief. You can't just leave, but you have to wait until somebody comes to relieve you. And we were working the 2 to 10 shift, so the cells were all locked up, and we had to wait until our relief came in. And usually takes a good 10 minutes, 15 minutes for the other officers who are coming in to do the 10 to 6 shift to get to us and then to exchange equipment, and we tell them what was going on, just let everybody know how things were going. And by the time that's all over with, and by the time we walk out the door, it could sometimes be half hour after the shift actually ended before we leave. And so this day, me and two of my co-workers were on our way out, get to our cars, say our goodbyes, hop in, on our way home, start to drive, and right in front of us, a drunk driver hits 3 cars and then flips his car. Again, without hesitation, we stopped our cars, we looked at the situation, we saw the person, we looked around. There wasn't any police there yet, so immediately we took it upon ourselves to use our vehicles, sort of like a blockade to keep everybody away from the stuff. The 2 ladies were there who were with me, 2 other officers in their vehicles. They got out, they moved around. We controlled the traffic. We called the police. We held down the scene. And after having worked 8 hours in the jail, and a little bit more because of the time it took us to get out, and we did that without even hesitating. And again, I go to that point where it's like, this is why those firemen ran into that building on September 11th, 2001. No hesitation, no fear. They just knew that they had a job to do and they did it. And that's just what happens with first responders, with corrections officers, with police officers, firemen. Oh my goodness. The medical people. I don't even know why I can't think of who they are. That's terrible, terrible, terrible. First aid is immediately there. Paramedics. You just go. It's instinct. You don't think about your own safety at that point in time. You think about the person or people who are in danger at the moment. Like that situation where that drunk driver, like I said, he hit like 3 cars before he flipped his own car. We were able to get him out of the vehicle, put him in a recovery position, and again, his car was flipped over, so I had to get him out. And got him out, and we waited for the police to show up, and once they came and they took over the scene, which would then it ended up being another just about an hour after that, because we wanted to make sure that everything was cool, and of course we were all still dressed in our uniforms, so we still sort of had I guess you could say, pseudo authority, so people would actually react to us, which helped as well. It's not like we were in civilian clothes. We were actually still dressed in our uniforms, and it made it for a little bit easier time for people to acknowledge the fact that we were trying to work on the scene. And when the police came, they took over. The firemen and the paramedics, they did what they had to do. And like I said, it was probably an extra hour after that, so 10:30, like 11:30 before we actually left and finally went home. And of course, when I spoke to them when we got to the work the next day, it's like, oh, so what time did you go to sleep last night? Everybody, all of us to a person said, yeah, it was something like 2-3 o'clock. Because you get all amped up, all the adrenaline just starts flowing, and there's nothing that you can do except for just wait until that adrenaline dissipates. And sometimes it takes longer than others. My goodness. That was something incredible. But again, that's why when you see those people doing things like going into those towers, how incredible it really is, because I get it. For the longest time, I didn't understand what would make somebody do it. In fact, but when I was in the situation, I then immediately realized you don't even think. It's like your training instantaneously kicks in. It's literally like flipping a light switch. There is no let me see what's going on, let me warm up to the situation. No, you go into it, you take a clean assessment of what's going on, and then you begin to do what needs to be done. And there is no in between. It's like, okay, here it is, car is down. What's the first thing we got to do? We got to make sure that there's no traffic going by. Boom, get the car set up around creating a perimeter. Then so we had to go and make sure that people knew to stay away and sort of directing traffic a little bit. Then one of us called the police, and then the fire department all came. It was just bang, bang, bang. There was no slowing down, no hesitating. It was just done. And that's the amazing part about it. So if you've never been a first responder, or if you've never been in a situation where you needed one, be thankful that you didn't need it. But at the same time, when you see those people and they seem like they may be sort of laxed in what they're doing, you might see a police officer just sort of cutting it up here or there. You might see the fireman sort of just doing playful things, joking around, right? But let me tell you, the second that a situation comes on, that switch flips, you're all in. All in. And it's just an amazing thing to behold. It really is. And I'm actually really grateful that I was able to have that training. And fortunately, I can say that that's something that sticks with you. You don't lose that. That's one of those things that you get and it doesn't go away. Doesn't go away. And thankfully, I would say, because it would put me in a situation, if there was somebody who was in some sort of harm, I would probably react without even thinking. I just would. Just like any other first responder would. Just get right in there. Now, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I'm going to talk about it now because it just seems to be in the general vein of what this episode's about. So I'm going to let it slide because, like I said, this is the episode that just needed to be done. And this is a subject that I've wanted to talk about. I don't believe that I have talked about it before, but if I have, forgive me. If I haven't, enjoy this because take it for what it is. Rest assured, I've said it 1,000 times and I'm going to preempt this whole thing by saying I am an independent in politics. I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. And I am not going to tell you which party that the offense happened with. So I'm even going to be that much more neutral. But I will say that the situation was about as bad a situation as you can get. But it's coming from a point of somebody who understands what the situation was. The people involved in the situation may not have necessarily understood the severity of what was going on, or maybe they didn't care. I don't know. I'm not inside their skull, so I can't tell you exactly what their motivation was. But here goes the story. I was going to vote one day, a few years back, for a candidate that, like I said, I'm not going to mention who it was. And waiting in line to get ready to vote, I go into the place where I have to vote. I'm not even going to tell you the type of place because it might even slightly, for some of my Philadelphia people, you might have an idea of where I went. So I'm not even going to go there. I'm just going to say I went into the polling place. I registered. Not yet, because I was still in the line. And I look over to my left at the time, because that's where the voting booths were. They were on my left, not left, my right. They were on my right. Voting booths were on my right, excuse me. And when I turned back to my left, somebody handed me a political flyer. This political flyer had candidates from one single party, just one party. I immediately took a look at it, and then I looked at where I was to my left. The person is standing there hanging more of these things out. Then I go and turn to my right again, and I see the actual voting booths again. I'm probably 10 feet away from the voting booths. 10. And I'm immediately looking around to my left again, seeing people getting ready to vote, taking these political flyers that have the candidates from one specific party. Now, it turned out there was a young lady with an older lady there, and the younger lady must have been getting ready to vote for the first time. And I'm all for that. I think that's great. Until the older lady said to the younger lady, who asked her a question. The younger lady asked her a question, like, "Who should I vote for?" Now, right away, that tells me that this younger lady had no. I hate to say it like this, but she didn't have any business in the voting booth because she didn't know who she was voting for. She didn't know anything about it. But she got this political pamphlet that had all these candidates from one party. And the older lady told her, just vote for all these people. Immediately, my head went sideways, and I was looking around at all these people with these singular political party pamphlet. And I was like, this is illegal. My wife was there with me when she was ready to vote. She's like, quiet down. I'm like, but this is illegal. This is 100% illegal. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is just one party with a political flyer inside the polling place. Not somewhere between 10 feet away from the actual polls, the actual voting machines, 10 feet away from the voting machines, and you're handing out political flyers. I know that this is 100% illegal. Like, it's illegal, not just wrong, unethical, but it's illegal, as in law problem. Police could be called and removed these people because what they were doing was illegal. Now, I don't have the rule in front of me, so everything I say about this law is going to be paraphrased, but trust me, what I'm saying is accurate. It is not word for word, but the spirit of what I'm saying is absolutely correct. The rule about distributing political flyers during an election day is that you cannot disseminate political flyers within 100 feet of a polling place. So, if you were roughly across the street, you could distribute your pamphlets. If you were on the doorstep of a polling place, that's illegal. You cannot distribute those flyers. But these people were doing it 10 feet from the polling booth itself. Excuse me. 10 feet from the voting booth. This is 100% illegal. Like, not even a little bit. There's not like a gray area. We're not saying, like they said, the person was across the street and somebody took a track discus tape measure, and they found out that that person is 99 feet 11 and a half inches away from the polling place, which would technically be illegal. But we're not gonna go with the semantics of an half inch. No, no, no. These people are 10 feet away from the voting booth. 100% illegal. Now, had I really wanted to do something, I could have, and I truthfully should have. Because, like I said, I don't have a political dog in the fight, if you may be. I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. I am an independent. Which means that it didn't matter to me which one of those parties was on those pamphlets. What was being done was illegal, and it should have been called upon and called out. And I'm going to be the first to admit that I did not do my civic duty on that. I should have called the authorities to let them know what was going on at this polling place, because what they were doing was literally tainting the vote. Anyone who had any idea of the other party involved wouldn't really care, because it seemed like everybody was pushing this one party in a place that they shouldn't be pushing it. Granted, those people, the flyers that I saw at the political, like at the actual voting booth, I didn't see them running around through my neighborhood at that point in time. They did it the day of the voting day. No. And granted, I think to myself, if I had called Channel 6 News, they would have been right there. They'd have called that thing out. I called the police and called Channel 6 about that. Yo, I've been on TV. There's no doubt about it, because I would have been like, hey, I just stopped something illegal from going on. Now, granted, in that situation, I probably would have been, in wrestling terms, the heel, because that political party was doing everything they could to try to gather as many votes as they could from the uninformed, which is why it is so important to have. I'm not saying that you have to go and get your doctorate in political science, but what I am saying is that you should at least watch 2 different news channels. And of course, this is me saying that from the perspective of an independent, and I think that's really the best and most balanced way to go about it. But of course, that's my opinion. But at least to have some idea, even if you are going to vote all Democrat or all Republican, at least have an idea of who you're voting for. A little bit. That's all I would ask. You may not know anything except for blue, but at least know kind of what the person looks like, even if you don't know what they represent. At least have some idea, so that you can at least say, hey, I'm voting for the person that I know, rather than voting for somebody that somebody told you to vote for. Same thing on the red side. You need to at least be able to put a face to a race, if that makes any sense. Put a face to the political races going on. And say, oh, I know that person. I think that they have a nice smile. I'll vote for them. I would rather that than somebody just say, here, vote for that person. Why? Don't worry, just do it. At least you have some basis, even though it's not the most sound of bases, but you're not being dictated to who to vote for. And that's where my biggest problem with that whole situation was. And like I said, I dropped the political football on that. I definitely should have called them out on it. I was loud loud enough so that people could hear me say, this is illegal. but I didn't go any further. I didn't actually take the next step in order to try to quell that situation. I should have done that. I should have done that. But that's in the past. Now, finally, another thing that happened. Of course, like I said, this show isn't going to come out until man, it's terrible getting old sometimes. Huh? This show isn't going to come out until September 20th. At this point, the individual that I'm about to speak about right now would have been deceased about 10 days. And this is a guy that the whole situation is purely sad. And it's more sad, in my opinion, on a personal level than it is political. It goes back to the fill in the blank question. And I'm going to go a little deep on this and just go with me. It turns out that on September 10th, in Utah at a college, a young man by the name of Charlie Kirk was killed. Now, at first, hearing that name and hearing that he had passed away, I was like, okay, I'm not really sure who that is. Call me naive. I didn't know who that was. All right? And then my mother told me, oh, he's a really conservative guy who goes around and he does debates. And I'm like, okay, that's not good. He's 31. They showed a picture of his wife and his young kids. And I'm like, oh, that's really sad. Young kids. And now we're going to fast forward to today, September 11th, 2025. I'm about to take my mother to dialysis, and she calls me in to her room real quick to see the guy who that she was talking about. And I took a good look at who Charlie Kirk was. Now, granted, I saw a bunch of people on Facebook and Twitter saying how sad it was, and I was like, I'm not really sure because I didn't know the name. But then I saw the face, and I was like, him? That guy? The debate guy that I follow on Instagram, I believe it is, where he has really spirited debates with people and he allows them to express their opinion completely. And then I find that his death came from someone who shot him from 200 yards away. So somebody with a sniper rifle killed him from a distance while he was outside holding court, essentially, doing these debates with people. And that just really blew my mind because I listened to the guy and I align with some of his opinions because, yes, I'm an independent, but I am quite conservative in that regard. So I understand a lot of the things that he's talking about, and I agree with a lot of the things he's talking about. I'll go that far to say. Like I said, as an independent, I don't agree with everything Republicans say or do, and I don't agree with everything Democrats say or do. But there are some things that I do agree that what Democrats do, and there are some things that I do. I think I said that all jumbled. Let me start that over again slightly. There are some things that Republicans do that I agree with. There are some things that Democrats do that I do not agree with. There are some things that Republicans do that I don't agree with. And there are some things that Democrats do that I do agree with. I am really neutral in the middle. To that point, I can truthfully say that I have to almost essentially go with my point again. Like I said about the last story I talked about, when I dropped the ball with that political pamphlets, I literally voted for everybody who was not on the pamphlet because of the illegal nature of it. Now, this guy, Charlie Kirk, had an opinion that a lot of people didn't like. But at the same token, there are a lot of people who loved everything he said. Now, for me personally, I didn't know what his name was until today, which I feel very bad for because I really enjoyed his debate format that he had with people. He'd have the mic set up, and people could come up and they would say something, and then he would rebut it, and then they would say something back, and it would go an even spirited debate back and forth. Something I'll have to admit that I've not seen really from the left or essentially Democrats. I haven't seen anybody do that, which is a little concerning. I'd like to see them do that, have an opinion, set it up so that a whole bunch of people who disagree with that opinion can then go back and forth and they can have a spirited debate. I enjoyed the spirit of what he did. It was good because going back to the last thing I talked about with those pamphlets, that one young lady had no idea why she was voting for who she was voting for. At least she voted. But the problem is, she didn't have any idea why. If she actually was able to ask questions or learn a little bit more, she would have a little bit more formed opinion. And it's good to have that knowledge. You might be surprised. You might be in a point where you're like, hey, I really don't believe in what this person's saying, and I'm not going to vote for them. Or the exact opposite. You might have been on the fence and say, no, I really don't like what they're about, and then you hear their opinion, and then all of a sudden you are, I don't know, I'm going to say you have a light bulb moment, and you then feel that, okay, I do agree with what this person is saying or doing. But you won't know unless you have the time to actually ask the questions. And Charlie Kirk, for the young people who may not be too deep into politics, are actually getting an opportunity to get there in his little debates that he was doing. It was really a great thing. It really was. And if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should appreciate it either way, because these are people who are actually being questioned and challenged. Their thought processes are being questioned, and if for no other reason, they may not ever agree with what Charlie Kirk was saying back to them. But the idea is they now have an opportunity to stand on their convictions, which is important. And whether or not he changed their opinion, he gave them a place where they could speak their truth. And other people could hear their truth. And again, there was a good, fair exchange. And ultimately, it's a good thing. Like I said, back to the fill in the blanks. Is it okay to disagree with people? Yes, it is. 100%. No problem. In fact, I'd rather have somebody tell me that they don't agree with what I'm saying or doing than to play it off as if, okay, it's whatever, I just gonna listen to it and just go with it. I'd rather you tell me you didn't agree, and then we could have a debate, which would be more interesting. It really would. It would actually be more spirited, and as long as it's in good spirit, both people can express their opinion. And the fact that I would find, okay, that's interesting. You don't agree with me. Why don't you agree with me? I'm curious. And then we could go back and forth. That's the way it should be. And then, of course, at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily trying to make you change your opinion. of what I'm saying to go to my side. And if you say something, you're not necessarily going to be able to change my mind, but you never know. There could be some spark that could actually change your mind in one way or another. But you'll never know if you don't actually have the debate. Now, like I said, I'm extremely saddened by the fact that I didn't know that that was the man's name. And I'd only really been cognizant of him for probably 6 months or so, 7 months. I wasn't really, I didn't really know about all that he was doing up until about that time. Um, his whole it's pretty big. His organization for these debates that he was running was called Turning Point, and for if no other reason, that what he did was so good. At the age of 31, he was actually getting younger people interested in politics. That's an important thing. I mean, it really is. Regardless of his opinion and what you thought of him, the fact that he was provoking that intellectual conversation was incredible. And the problem that I have with his death, beyond his death, is the fact that someone didn't just kill him. When you shoot somebody from 200 yards, when that person is in the middle of a public speaking event, that shows two things. Absolute cowardice, because you didn't have the guts to walk up to him face to face and end his life. You had to do it from so far away that the likelihood of you being caught quickly was very, very low. So you were a coward. Next problem is the fact that the reason he was killed, 99.99%, now by the time that this show airs, we will probably know more about the person who killed him. And most likely that person didn't align with him politically or ideologically. I mean, the guy was a conservative Christian who had his Christian values, and boy, a lot of those I share. And the fact that he was forthright with him, he was not quiet about it. He was going to be putting right up in the front, let you know. That just tells me that somebody killed this young man because of his opinion at the end of the day. Nothing he did. His opinion of what he thought, what he was believed, what he expressed. I mean, do you realize how deep that goes? How deep that goes. I mean, like it or not, that attempt on Donald Trump's life was terrible. Somebody who did not agree with his opinion. And at the end of the day, you're going to kill somebody because you don't agree with their opinion? Their opinion? Like, what is this? What are we doing? I mean, realistically, that's what this should have been a part of. This should have been a part of the "What Are We Doing" episode. You're going to kill somebody because of you don't like their opinion. Really? Really? I'm a 49ers fan. A stark 49ers fan. I love the 49ers. I also like the Yankees. And the New Jersey Devils. Now, if I saw somebody walking down the street with a Rams hat wearing a Boston Red Sox shirt and Philadelphia Flyers coat on, I'm not going to run up to them and shoot them. because their opinions completely differ from mine. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And at the end of the day, that's why that young man died. He died because somebody didn't like his opinion, mostly. I mean, granted, I'll be the first to tell you that I am not going to go to a Ku Klux Klan rally. Obviously. But if you were to tell me that you were going to assassinate someone who was going to stand up and talk about Klan philosophy, I would be one of the first people to dive at you to take you out before you could take the shot. Because that person has a right to their opinion, regardless to what it is. That's what we do in this country. That's what we do in this country. Regardless if the opinion is wrong or not, it's that person's opinion. And they have a right to their opinion. There's no reason for somebody to lose their life over an opinion. And it just makes no sense. No sense that at this point in time, there is another widow. There are now 2 young children who are going to grow up without their father because somebody did not like his opinion. What are we doing? Really, what are we doing? There's got to be a better way than this, because truthfully, it's absolute madness. It makes no sense whatsoever for somebody to be killed for their opinion. And that is exactly why that young man died. And once again, I'm really upset that I didn't take the time to actually learn the guy's name. But like I said, when I was able to put the name with the face, I became really agitated because I was like, I understood now. I didn't know what the man's name was, but once I found out, I was like, oh my goodness. Name with a face, and then I see the reason why just sort of popped in my mind. It's disgusting. It's terrible. It's a shame. And I honestly think that regardless of which side you may lean, right or left, Republican, Democrat, neutral, sort of like me as an independent, we should all be a little bit ashamed of ourselves for letting something like that happen. Just a little bit. We really should. Because as a country, we're better than that. And on that note, I'm going to ring the bell and I'm going to put the main event to an end. I definitely let that go awful deep, and I definitely moved into a very serious spot there because I really think that I needed to. I really do. And I'm going to go directly into the Spear of the Week, which should be pretty obvious after my final part of that main event. I mean, as of the time that I'm recording this, we don't know who the assassin was or why, but it doesn't matter. Charlie Kirk's assassin is, without a doubt, the person who deserves the Spear of the Week. And you can forget the political ideologies and all that other stuff. What he did, or she did, this assassin, is left a widow and 2 children without their father and without their husband. At the end of the day, that's the worst part. Now, as a Christian, I know that he is in a far better place than he was here, but it is sad to think of what he could have done. Just inspiring more people to debate. Sad. that whoever that assassin was essentially robbed us of his ability to continue to move with his Turning Point organization, and rob him again, a wife of her husband, 2 children of their father. It's just sad and disgusting. Spear of the Week, the assassin of Charlie Kirk. Now, I know what I said about the picks, because without doing this, I need to lighten this a little bit, which is good. That's why I'm definitely not going to go into the questions. We're not going to do that until after football season. But I think for both me and anyone who went on that ride with me about this episode here, this episode that is clearly going to be labeled the show that needed to be done. I needed to do that. I'm going to tell you the picks for week 3. Now, granted, I didn't tell you the results of week 2 because, as I record, week 2 hasn't happened yet. And week 3, obviously, hasn't happened yet either. So, in the perfect world, during my next episode, when I give you my week 4 picks, I'll then tell you the results that I had in week 2 and in week 3, which are already documented. Week 2, I'll just tell you how I did. Now, week 3 will be the same. So, during that next episode, I'm going to have 10 picks that I'm going to spit through really quickly and tell you what my record is at the end of them. But now, my week 3 picks, I have the Miami Dolphins getting lambasted by the Bills, 42-10. Vikings and Bengals, I think Joe Burrow is going to win this one. Minnesota is going to go down. I believe Bengals win 20-17. Commanders, I just like that team unless they play the 49ers, which they don't this year. I expect them to win 30-21 over the Raiders. San Diego Superchargers, nope, they're not from San Diego anymore. Los Angeles. Chargers will barely beat the Broncos, because I think the Broncos are pretty good. But I also think the Chargers are getting themselves ready for another playoff push. Because I think that one of these two, the Broncos or the Chargers, are going to replace the Chiefs in the playoffs. And I'm thinking that at least for the short term, I like Los Angeles. The Chargers 28, the Broncos 17. Division game for the 49ers. I'm not picking against them against the Cardinals. I see the 49ers winning 21 and the Cardinals losing with only 17 points. 49er defense is that good and they're real. Those are my picks. Bills beating the Dolphins. Bengals beating the Vikings. Commanders winning over the Raiders. Chargers edging out the Broncos. And 49ers defeating the Cardinals. That's my week 3 pick. Now, to put the show to an end. The best way I know how, by letting you all know that you need to join us. Join us on the LIP Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. You can always check me out on Instagram, Philip Henderson 5102. I'm out there on Twitter somewhere. You'll see me every once in a while. And on X. But as for now, it's time for me to give you the words of wisdom. The words of wisdom, which I believe are true words of wisdom today, based on the events of today and the history of today, which is 9/11. I honestly believe that these words just make sense between the passing of Charlie Kirk and again, like I said, the events of 9/11, this is what I got for you. If we can't express our opinions in this country, we are doomed. If we can't express our opinions in this country, we are doomed. It's just that simple. And now I'm going to say that I'm going to have a quick moment of silence for Mr. Charlie Kirk. My name is Phil, and you just listened to The Lip.